Well, welcome to Facebook Live. This morning with, for me, a very special guest, June Friesen. And we've already had some great discussions about her photography, which has inspired me. So I hope that we have time to really get into that later as we go on. And first of all, let me just say, because that's what we're going to talk about, photography and the reflections that she puts up each morning on the God Space Light community group, which I know many of you appreciate as much as I do. June has had quite a variety of professions in her life. She trained as a nurse. She was a preschool teacher, a chaplain, a minister, a Bible study leader, and also conducts retreats for women impacted by incarceration. And of course, on the sideline, she's a regular contributor both to God Space and to the God Space Light community group. And she lives in Phoenix, Arizona, where I gather today it's going to be 106 degrees, did you say, June?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself as a good start here?
Okay, well, I grew up in North Dakota, where instead of being 106, it could be 40 below zero. So I swapped. Anyway, I got married, moved to Canada, lived in British Columbia, lived in Toronto, Ontario. 1 year in California while my husband finished his degree, and 41 years in Arizona. And a few years ago, actually, it's probably 30 years ago, I started with a book that got me more aware of my surroundings. It's called Simple Abundance. It taught me gratitude, and it taught me to listen for the birds to sing when I was walking, and the different sounds they were singing, and just the different trees, the different flowers, the different grasses. And along with that, then I started just playing with taking pictures, and just then sitting and opening my spirit to God. And God allowed me to see different things in the pictures that I was taking. And then he gifted me with the ability to express things about those pictures.
Wonderful. Yeah, well, and you both take beautiful and inspiring photos and express your reflections beautifully as well. So I think, as I said, many of us have appreciated that. And, and we do have similar interests. I mean, I remember when you first started communicating, I think you'd read The Gift of Wonder, and you were leading a Bible study group. And some of the creative things that you came up with in that group were just inspiring for me to think that people could come up with those out of reading The Gift of Wonder. And then I know that, even though we've never met, it's just been wonderful to see you be able to express yourself through God Space Light in other ways as well. And I know I've learned a lot from you as we've gone through things. And we were talking this morning about the post that you did this morning. Do you want to just tell us a little bit more about that? Because I thought that was inspiring, particularly inspiring this morning.
Well, every morning we have a shepherd, and we live in a townhouse. So we walk about a mile and a half. And as I started my walk, I noticed the moon this morning. It was so beautiful, and there was a place where I could stop and take a picture. So I took a picture, and all that showed on my phone was the moon. So when I got home, I looked at my picture, and I'm like, okay, so the hawk, one of the hawks, we have a hawk family in our neighborhood. One of the hawks was sitting on a post. I said to my husband, I said, one of the hawks photobombed my moon picture. And I was going to just delete that off of the picture. And then I thought, no, that's how it is in our lives. We're going along just fine. And all of a sudden, God put something in our pathway, and it's kind of could be like a photobomb to catch our attention.
Uh-huh.
So
Yep. No, I know exactly that. Before we go any further, I just wanted to mention, if I do have the Facebook Live session open on my iPhone, so that if people want to make comments or ask questions, you can do that into the iPhone. So that would be great. But when June shared this morning, one of the things that came to me, the first book that I read that really impacted me about photography as a spiritual practice was this one by Christine Valters Paintner. It's one of her earlier books, Eyes of the Heart. And part of what she says, and this is what's really stayed with me over the years, rather than taking photos or shooting them or even making photos, we will practice receiving images as a gift. And I think this is what June did this morning. The traditional words for photography are possessive and aggressive, yet the actual mechanism of photography is that light is reflected off a subject and received by the camera through the lens opening. We can create conditions for a good photo, but ultimately we must stand in a posture of receiving and see what actually shows up in the image. And as I was rereading that this morning, it occurred to me, all this business of photoshopping photos so that they look better, or of cropping them so we crop out the things that we don't think we want to have in the photo. In some ways, it spoils the photo because we're not receiving the image. I mean, June could have cropped out that hawk this morning, but I love the way that she was receiving the image in this. And I think, June, you were telling me about some other situations in which you've done that in a beautiful way as well.
I shared with Christine earlier that I was in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, where my son and daughter-in-law live, and it was raining likely off and on in the valley, and it was fall time. All of a sudden there was a rainbow over the valley, and I took my camera and shot a picture of it, and actually shot a few pictures. And when we put them on the computer later, one of the pictures has a fall leaf, sort of a brown orange, right in the middle of the picture, as if it was just meant to be. And there's not a tree branch, there's not a tree, nothing, just air. And when I saw that, I just was like, wow, that is a gift. And I actually, I pulled another, I have a photo that sits right here on my desk, and I don't know if I'll be able to, I'm not real good at doing this, getting these things on the camera, but maybe I'll put it on with the writing. But I went outside one morning several years ago to take a picture of a spider in this huge spider web. And the spider web was in a sort of in a shaded area, but the sun was shining on it. And when I put the picture on my screen, my computer screen, there's rainbow colors in the spider web. And it just, I mean, the spider has sun shining on him in the middle of the web, but then there's these rainbow. I was just like, okay, so what? And I often say, God, what's up with this? Because oftentimes when he does those things in a photograph for me, there's something sitting in my spirit waiting to come out. And so those are a couple of examples that have happened. I mean, I can think of more if I sit and just think about it or look at past writings or pictures and stuff. But yeah, it's sometimes I consciously take a picture. There is a flower that I've posted at least once or twice that has part of this pistil or stamen actually has a cross. And it lays, if you take the picture right, it lays right against the petal. And so you have this gold cross against this petal, whether the
beautiful
pink or yellow or white. And I just I love those flowers, and I can stand and look at those flowers when I'm out walking for quite a while. Just how does that work? How does God do that?
Mm. Oh, that's beautiful, because, firstly, I think that so often, what's in your spirit that wants to come out in response to these photos? I love that thought, because I think many of us take photos and we end up with thousands of photos that we never really look at or allow God to speak to us through. And yet I do think that photography is a way that God speaks to us, particularly if, as Christine Valdez-Paintner said, if we receive the image rather than just taking a photo. It's a whole different way of looking at things. And of course, it makes us pause, I think. And I mean, to have that kind of an interaction with a photo, we've got to stop and look at it. We can't just take it. We can't just take it and go by, or take a half a dozen photos of the one flower and zip off to the next flower or off to the next scene or something like that. We've really got to take the time to enter into it. Right. And like you do, to come back to it sometimes, to go back to what it was that stirred our soul. And that made us feel that there was something there that God wanted to say to us, and that's part of what I love about the way you do photography, because, it's obviously more than just taking photos. It is both receiving the image and then seeing what will bubble up from inside you in response to those images. As I said, I don't think many of us do that. I know as you were just talking there, I thought, wow, I don't think I do that all the time. I know sometimes I do, but when I'm in a hurry, if I see a beautiful sunset or something like that, and I'll click the photos, and sometimes I forget to go back to them. And that's crazy. Why did I click them? Why did I take photos? Why do I have thousands of photos on my camera that on my computer that I hardly ever look at? I think I've got something like 30,000 photos on my computer. Actually, it's more than that, because I think I've got 30,000 photos on this computer and 30,000 photos in another archive on the computer. So, it's a matter of why we take them. And are there other stories, June, about your photography that are special that you think you'd like to share this morning or today?
Well, one of the things that really actually probably prompted my writing with photos was when I took spiritual direction in 2004 to 2006, I think it was right in that area. It was a 2-year program. The leader of that spiritual direction program, she was really into what's called Visio Divina. I think I'm saying that right.
Yep.
And I had no clue. I mean, nothing. I had been writing at that point in time and doing a little bit of stuff with pictures, but nothing. And so she would give these assignments where we would have to go and sit outside for 45 minutes. She'd say, go and find some flowers or a quiet space or a tree. And she'd say, go and sit there and then write down some thoughts. And I really thought that this was a little far out, because this was way out of my comfort zone. And so then the other thing she would say, and I want you to do this during the next 3 or 4 weeks before we meet again, go someplace once or twice and sit. And we have a beautiful, beautiful botanical gardens. And I know you've seen pictures of me posting from the botanical gardens. I used to go and sit. I still know where the table is that I sat. And I would sit there with my journal. And I would think, okay, so what am I going to write about today? And I'd be looking around. But that definitely was probably the biggest discipline I learned through spiritual direction. I learned a lot of other things too, but that opened my ability to get out of me, inside of me, what I really felt when I observed things in God's creation. So that was a really, really big thing for me.
Oh, it's interesting because the thing that I think inspired me to take a closer look at my photos and to write about them was firstly Lectio Divina, and then, you know, moving into, well, Visio Divina, or what some people call Lectio Terra, which is, you know, really what you're describing, where you use elements of nature as a focus rather than a photograph, or a painting or something like that, which is what traditionally Visio Divina is about. And then some people now have named, you know, when we go out into nature and use, you know, the elements of nature as the focus for our reflection, they call it Lectio Terra. I mean, not that it matters what you call these things,
right?
I don't think, but that's beautiful, because I think, you know, these kinds of practices encourage us to slow down and just take notice of the things that are around us, and then to allow, you know, our responses to those to bubble up from within our souls,
right?
Or our spirits, yeah, which is beautiful. It's beautiful. One of the series of images that you've been using that I've just loved is the Chihuly glass.
Chihuly glass.
Yeah, and that was so inspiring. And did you do that on one trip to wherever it was, or did you do several?
So we are privileged in Arizona to have Chihuly glass at the Botanical Gardens. This was the second time it was displayed, and they come and put several pieces in different places in the garden area. And this year they had an indoor exhibit as well. I wanted more photos of the indoor exhibit, but it was really, really hard to get concentrated photos of those images, because they were sort of all mixed together. And I totally get it because of the way they were trying to, you know, create. But this is the second time they've been here. They were here a number of years ago as well. And it'll be here, I think it's a total of 6 months, because it's leaving, I think Father's Day is now the last day it'll be here. And they put them in different places in the different sculptures. And I kind of, when I'm walking, I just kind of take different pictures and then look at them afterwards and, you know, ponder them. And they had another one at another spot here in Phoenix, and we never got to it with the way our lives kind of went. And I think that too will leave now when this one leaves Botanical Gardens. But there is a museum up in Washington State.
Yes,
of Chihuly glass.
Chihuly Gardens, yeah, but it's mainly inside.
Yeah,
you know, it doesn't have the outside. I've been through it once, but it doesn't have, because I saw the images that you had and I thought, oh wow, you know, you don't see anything like that. It did remind me of an exhibit I saw in Sydney, Australia, which was sculptured by the sea. It wasn't Chihuly glass, but it was, you know, famous sculptures that had been done along the sea path. And they were there, I think, for about 3 or 4 months, and quite fascinating, you know, and with the kind of backdrops that they choose for these things. It gives you a whole different impression than it does when you just look at the scene. To have, you know, sculpture or glass or something like that in it, or, you know, if you're just looking at the sculpture, you know, to have that kind of a background as well. And I think that we can really benefit from those kinds of things. What do you have a favorite photo that you've taken? That's probably
Well, the favorite one is probably that rainbow with the leaf
Uh-huh.
in it. I mean, that definitely is a favorite. And I have a couple of favorites. One hasn't, I don't even think I've posted this on Facebook. I have it framed. And because I've been in process of redecorating, I have nothing hardly hung on my walls
Mm.
yet. But I have my oldest granddaughter when she was, I think, about 2. She was standing and looking into a fountain.
Mm.
And so I have her back profile looking into this fountain. And because I was there with her,
Uh-huh.
I picked up, she just was pondering how this water fountain was working and listening to the water. And that captured something for me. I also have one that I posted, I think I posted it when I did the lament for Uvalde, with the folded hands of a baby.
Mm.
And above the hands, it said love. Those are actually my youngest granddaughter's hands when she was first born. She was sleeping and her hands were folded over her. And I saw that her little sleeper had love on it. And I took that photo.
That was a beautiful photo. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a big 8x10 of that one that's usually hanging on my wall too, again. And I was going to pull some of these out, but I still have all my big photos packed one against the other in another room. That's probably the last corner I'm going to get to as I'm cleaning that room out. But yeah, so, and sometimes I take photos and they have more meaning as time goes on.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. I think it's interesting because we have very few walls in our house because we've got a lot of windows,
Mm-hmm.
which is great. Or I should say windows and bookcases are what cover up the walls. So there's not much space for photos. But what I've done instead to display photos is, I have a number of these kind of with prayers that I've written, combined with the photo that I've taken, and again, like you, the significance of them, I think, grows the longer that I've got them, and some of them have been taken. Like I've got one, I don't think I've got it out. Oh, I do have it out at the moment. This one where I wrote a Celtic style prayer. And it's next to Celtic cross on the island of Iona, and of course both of those have growing significance, because that's Iona has been a place of retreat for Tom and I, and it's a place that we've just loved. And so the significance that, we can't go back there. We're not sure that we'll get back there again. But to have photos like that, that have meaning and that I can pull out and I can use. So, yeah, I think there are a lot of ways that we can display our photos that have growing meaning and stir increasing reflection for us as well, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. Well, I just thought of some other photos I have. We have a Stations of the Cross in Yarnell, Arizona, which is a group of sisters had built on the side of a mountain. And there's statues there, of several of them of Jesus. And I posted some of those during Lent and Easter season. But and my husband says, it's not fair that you get these photos and I don't even try. I've taken photos of, there's one where Mary is holding Jesus after they take him off the cross. And the way the sun, and you can't see this when you're taking the photo. There's no way you can see it. I don't see it until I get home and put it on the computer. I see these shafts of light, like there was shafts of green and yellow light. And I said, look at that. I said, that's as if there's hope There's going to be new life.
Beautiful.
And I got a couple more of those this year, one of them by the door of the tomb.
Mhm.
And, you know, but those are things that you have no way of crafting them or thinking, well, this I'm going to do this and I'm going to get this, because I shot one over a valley one time and there was that shaft of light. And I said to my husband, I said, where do these shafts of light come from? He said, well, you're special, I guess. And I'm like, well, okay, but just it's put an intrigue into me so that I'm like, okay, what am I going to see when I really put these photos on my note or my computer and really see them in large size?
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love, one of the things that I love taking photos of is the changing light. You know, because it intrigues me, because having grown up in Australia, where you don't have the same change of seasons, you know, particularly in the winter, I find here, you know, so much further away from the equator, and the sun is so much lower down, the light, the changes in the light are just phenomenal. And I would suspect that where you are, that the dry air is part of what contributes to some of the kind of the effects of the light
Right.
at different times. So it's beautiful. June, what kind of camera do you use?
Actually, I don't use a camera anymore except my phone.
To be honest, I'm the same. I've got a fairly good camera.
I do have to. I started with when I first started taking, my husband bought me a very nice Canon, and that's probably around 20 years ago. I used it for many years, and then I bought a new one, and that one I used for a long time too, and I still have it. I bought a new one 2 years ago, and I've hardly used it because I've gotten used to not having something hang around my neck. And because I've been able to adapt using my phone, I hardly carry my camera now. But the first Canon I had, I gave to my daughter-in-law to use, and shortly after I gave it to her, it didn't work. She took it to the Canon shop, and the fellow said, I don't know who had this camera, but they literally wore the insides of the camera out. And I felt so bad because I'd given her something I'd worn out and I didn't.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, yeah, it's interesting because, like you know, I hate to confess that most 90% of my photos these days are taken on my camera, particularly, and I would think on my phone. My camera was probably getting on to being 10 years old.
Yeah.
And I would think, and I think actually that the photos I get, I've got an iPhone 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the photos that I get with this are better than the quality of the photos that I get with my camera. So it's been a delight to have that, you know, and it's of course one of the things that we're blessed with. Well, believe it or not, we are coming to an end of our time here. And no comments on Facebook. So, but I will get up the name of this book on the Facebook Live so that people, if they're interested in it, can look at it. And, you know, there are other books, but I've found very few that talk about the art of photography as a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
Or, you know, which is a shame because I think, like you, June, there are a growing number of people that have found that photography can be a real kind of spiritual practice, you know, and that it can bring something bubbling up from our souls in a way that's just beautiful. Just to let you know, there will not be a Facebook Live in 2 weeks' time, partly because of the Digging Deeper webinar on the June the 25th. And I find I just can't kind of handle too many these kinds of things. So hopefully you will sign up for the June 25th webinar, Digging Deeper. And don't forget, of course, to enter the Digging Deeper giveaway as well. 2 copies here in the US and 2 digital copies for those that are overseas. And one of the things June and I were talking about earlier is how nice it is to be able to use colored photos in books these days. And this book has quite a lot of colored photos in it, and it's lovely to be able to do that. And I'm encouraging her to think about republishing some books that she's written in the past where she'd like to have colored photos in them. So I'm not quite sure when the next Facebook Live session will be, but it'll probably be at the beginning of July. So thank you for being with us this morning, and we hope that this has been helpful for those that have watched, and that those who will watch afterwards or when it goes up on YouTube. So many blessings. In fact, June, would you like to say a prayer as we just end off here?
God, thank you for the gift of eyes to see, ears to hear. Thank you for all of the technology you've gifted our country and our world with, so that we can share with one another, so that we can capture photographs, we can share our spirits and our hearts with each other. May our lives be shining vessels for you in all that we do and say, wherever we are, in your name. Amen.
Amen and amen. And many blessings on everybody.
Thank you.